My goalkeeping idol is somebody who's a little bit different. It was UC Askelainen was my goalkeeping idol, the Bolton Wanderers, and for me, arguably one of the best goalkeepers who played in the Premier League. We've got a characteristic that we call like nerve strength, which is like the inner belief to perform under pressure. When you look at people like Gigi Buffon, who's lifted the World Cup, or those ilka players, they've got the inner belief to perform under pressure. If you're going to be taking 7, 8-year-olds, and I will have got this really wrong in my early career, it's going to be quite controversial, but like don't be so focused on giving them loads of technical information first. So my second question was like, how long have you been a goalkeeper? And it's funny, I'm not a goalkeeper. How have you got here? I'm a midfielder for my school's team, and he didn't turn up, the goalie, so I went in goal. And then an Aston Villa scout come over to me and said, "Would you mind coming in?" And I got a phone call from Fred saying, "You need to go and take the first team." And I'm only 19, and I didn't coach. I definitely didn't coach. I just put a session on. I hoped, and if I'm being honest, just wanted it to end. You got 3 number ones because they're number ones for their clubs, so that can be quite different in terms of getting him to understand this is part of international football. I did this session, I sent it to him, and he said, you know, come up and have a coffee and stuff like that. I went to meet him, and he was like, "You look like the same. You look like any goalkeeping coach in the country. The best players in the world can adapt and play different ways. If you're going to be one of those players, I want you to play slightly different for us."
Sam Meek is one of the most interesting goalkeeping coaches in English football today because he's done the full journey, but he's done it the hard way. He didn't arrive at the FA by accident, and he's built his career inside some of the most demanding academy environments in the country. When you're not coaching finished goalkeepers, you're building them from scratch. Sam started at Bolton Wanderers, spending over 6 years working across age groups from under 7 right through to under 21s. You don't build great keepers in a week, you build them over years. From Bolton, Sam moved into Birmingham City's academy, leading the goalkeeping programme across the full age range, and then came Aston Villa, where he led the academy programme from under 9s to under 21s again. Also stepped into the first team environment as temporary first team keeper coach during the 2018-2019 season. It's a rare combination. Most coaches either become development specialists or they move into senior football and stay there, but Sam's done both. And what makes his story even more relevant to the modern game is this: Sam hasn't only coached goalkeepers. During his time at Aston Villa and on occasion with England, he's also worked as an assistant coach with outfield players and contributed as a set-piece coach as a wider part of the staff role. And that matters because the modern goalkeeper, as we've already seen in previous episodes, he's not just a shot stopper anymore. They're part of the tactical plan and they're part of the build-up. And in many teams, they're a key voice in organisation, shape and set pieces. Today, Sam is national goalkeeping coach with the Football Association, working in the England setup and helping shape how modern English goalkeepers are developed and prepared. And he holds some of the highest coaching qualifications available in the game: the UEFA Goalkeeper A licence, UEFA A licence and the UEFA Pro licence. This episode's a chance to speak to someone who's lived the real goalkeeping pathway from the inside and now sits at the top of it. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks very much.
Before I jump into too much about goalkeeping itself, when I think back to you as a kid, who was your goalkeeping idol?
So my goalkeeping idol is somebody who's it's a little bit different. So it was UC Askelainen was my goalkeeping idol. It was at Bolton Wanderers, and for me, arguably one of the best goalkeepers who played in the Premier League. And I was fortunate enough to be at Bolton Wanderers prior to my coaching time as an aspiring goalkeeper there as well, working with Fred Barber, who I idolised as a top coach. He gave me a lot of my early coaching experiences as well. But I had the opportunity to train alongside UC Askelainen on multiple occasions when I was at Bolton Wanderers there as like an under 18 sort of player. So just to see his work ethic, his intensity, and then be close to the pitch to see him play on Saturdays or most times was incredible. So yeah, he was my idol really. You know, I sort of just love football, so I watched all football, but he was definitely my goalkeeping idol, 100%. And I always remember Fred telling me stories of when he arrived from Finland with like just a suitcase for something like £60,000 or something like that. Nobody knew who he was, to turn into this almost iconic Premier League goalkeeper. But you know, the way he trained every single day was somebody who I looked up to and somebody I wanted to be one day.
What was it like first time you met your idol then? Because a lot of the coaches that we spoke to so far, we talked about Bruce Grobbelaar and people who had been idols long before the coaches came through into the system. But you've met and worked alongside, so that's got to be an incredible feeling when you've gotten to that point with your career, right?
Yeah, of course. I think like, if I'm being honest, I didn't even know he was my idol until he was. I know that sounds a bit stupid to say, but I look back now and I was such an innocent kid at like 12, 13, 14, that age when I started to get exposed to Bolton Wanderers first team players. And there's something on Sky Sports now talking about Big Sam's Bolton team.
Yeah.
So I was around about 18 when, 17, 18 when they were sort of at the height of the Premier League, when they were in the top 6. And I pinch myself now and think like, I wish I'd have made more of the moment when you're seeing Ivan Campo, Kevin Nolan, Kevin Davis, Nicholas Anelka, JJ Okocha, all those players that I was sometimes fortunate to actually be in a training session with them. Sort of pinch myself a little bit now, but Yusuf probably became my idol when I was training with him and being fortunate enough to be around him. So just I didn't know he was an idol until I look back, really. So you're sort of asking me the question.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, he's the one. He's the one. But prior to that, I just used to love football and watch any kind of football, I mean, we got Sky for the first time when I was about 12 or something like that, and La Liga's on, and the Channel 4 Italia, I can't remember what it's called now, Channel 4, but the Golazio or something like that. You're watching that all the time, and used to watch a variety of different goalkeepers, and somebody else who honestly is an idol, but somebody I really respect in the game for what he's done and probably doesn't get enough plaudits is obviously Gigi Buffon as well, in terms of what he did. Probably one of the most unluckiest goalkeepers not to win the Champions League, really, but he's done everything else.
Yeah.
He's done everything else.
What do you think, you mentioned Buffon there, you've got EC, what do you think stands them apart from their peers? What, in your mind, what do you see that really makes them different?
And I don't think you ever fully know unless you're around them what makes them different. It's just your perception of what you may see. So for goalkeepers like Gigi Buffon, it would be, we've got a characteristic that we call like nerve strength, which is like the inner belief to perform under pressure.
Right.
And I think when you look at people like Gigi Buffon, who's lifted the World Cup, or those ilka players, that they've got that.
Yeah.
They've got that in that moment. They've got the inner belief to perform under pressure. In some of the most pressurised games in the world, you're talking World Cup finals, European Championship finals, or massive Champions League games. So
almost thrive under it.
Yeah, I think they do. Yeah, I really believe they do thrive under it, and they. Most people, I mean, if you stick me on a pitch in that type of game, there's all sorts of nerves and all sorts of things going through your head. They probably get the same feelings, but they've just got something different that they relish those opportunities and perform.
Wired differently.
Yeah.
So then, going back to your early coaching career, like what was your first coaching role like? What did that teach you as a coach, I guess?
Yeah. So my first coaching role was with Fred Barber. And I'd recently left Bolton as I didn't get anything at Bolton as a player, so I'd recently left. But Fred kept me in and around, and he took me to Switzerland with a couple of coaches and UC, and we did like pretty much like today, like a little soccer school type thing, and in just outside of Zurich. And this was my first ever coaching experience. I don't know how to coach. I don't know what to coach. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm only 18. And Fred sort of just said to me, right, this is the session, got everybody in, and said to me, there's your group of players, off you go, coach them. So my first coaching experience is with a group of kids who don't speak English, which was an even bigger challenge.
Deep end.
It was a bigger challenge. So those are my first coaching experiences. I was really fortunate to have somebody like Fred who sort of made me think there's another route here into football, which is coaching. I was fortunate enough that Bolton Wanderers were lucky. Well, I was lucky enough, that Bolton Wanderers gave me a job, and I started to coach all different types of goalkeepers, like 7-8-year-olds. Go and coach. They called them shadow squads, so like just on the outside of the academies, like in the community. Bolton Wanderers in the community doing a little bit of that. Then that led to a little bit more age groups, And then most interestingly, like probably a year later, through circumstance, Fred was Northern Ireland's first team goalkeeping coach at the time. So he went away with Northern Ireland. And Neil Edwards, another coach who I really respect and I've got a lot of time for. He's a big part of my my development as well as a young coach in the early stages. He was like the youth goalkeeping coach for Bolton Wanderers, like the 18s to 21s, if you want to call it that. Reserves then, 18s to reserves, and he was going to take the first team while Fred was away with Northern Ireland, the training, and one day he couldn't come in. I think he had an emergency. He couldn't come in, and I got a phone call from Fred saying you need to go and take the first team. And I'm only 19, and I didn't coach. I definitely didn't coach. I just put a session on. I hoped, and if I'm being honest, just wanted it to end. Like I put the session on, I just wanted it to end.
Just trying to avoid a disaster.
Yeah, because I've got the first time ever UC's not gone away with Finland, and he's stayed. So I'm taking UC. We had Ian Walker as well, who was an England goalkeeper, and he previous England goalkeeper, and he was there, and Ali Al-Absi was there, and then we had another goalkeeper that was there who I was only a year older than, and I'd previously been in the same youth team training sessions with him and stuff like that. So it was an interesting experience, but looking back, like I probably didn't coach. I probably coached what I got coached, or just put sessions on that I was in myself, and that was my first experience of just do what you got taught. Just do what you got taught.
100%. You've got to start somewhere. You've got to have that day one. Everybody has day one.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But quite unusual to have it at such a young age as well, and being kind of thrown in the deep end, no prep. But do you think that was easier having no prep than kind of having the pressure of knowing that session was coming up, but you maybe panic a bit more or
I think like in the academies now, you obviously have to have your goalkeeping B license and your UEFA Outfield B license to be a coach in the academy. And it's really interesting because we was before something called EPPP, so it was quite a few years before that came in, and because I got like a level 1 and a level 2, I was able to start coaching, and I only really got my B license, went and did it in Wales first. I only really did my B license probably when I was about 20, so I had like 2 years of coaching without a license. If you like, don't obviously Bolton knew that, but it was back then. So when I actually took my B license, my goalkeeping B license, I actually felt comfortable to take it, if that makes sense, because I'd had experience of some sort of experience, low experience at the time, but I'd had some sort of low experience of coaching before I go on a coaching license. Whereas I think it can be quite difficult for coaches now, where it's a bit like chicken and the egg. To coach in an academy, you need a B license, but to get on the B license, you need to be in an academy. So it's a little bit like, how did they get that? Yeah. And how did they get that experience? And people are trying to find different ways to do it. But yeah, I felt ready to do my licenses, probably because I'd been coaching for at least 18 months, 2 years before I took my first one.
Yeah, and it's a common theme through a lot of the stories that we've discussed with the coaches that have been in, is they've more or less found their own way to become a coach. There's no one set path, and it's more or less you've got to create your own look, right? You've got to find your own path and pursue it head first, because that's what matters.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Thinking about the young keepers, we talked about the under 7s, under 8s. What would you say at that age, what's the one thing that those young goalkeepers need in general, more than anything today, not just to progress to become a professional, but what do you think stands a goalkeeper apart from the rest of his teammates at that age?
If I'm being honest, it's not about the player, it's about the coach who's taking them. So if you're going to be taking 7, 8 year olds, and I will have got this really wrong in my early career, is like, it's going to be quite controversial, but be like, don't be so focused on giving them loads of technical information first. Like at 7, 8 years old, just get them loving being a goalkeeper. Make everything enjoyable that you do. Yes, you can give your technical points and try and help them and guide them in the right way, but they've got to fall in love with the game. They've got to fall in love with goalkeeping. Let's not be too serious at 7, 8, 9 years of age. Like, I've been coaching some of the kids today, and I've really enjoyed it. I've loved it. It was like stepping back into my 18-year-old self again as a coach, with coaching these 9, 10-year-olds and stuff like that. So you don't need to stand apart as a goalkeeper at 7, 8, 9. You don't need to. You just need to enjoy the game and love it, and love throwing yourself around in the mud. That's all you need to do. And as a coach, we're there to facilitate that enjoyment and that learning, not to coach them out of enjoying football or knock the enjoyment out of it. That's essentially what they're here to do, because they just love playing the game.
And I think that was reflected in your session today. You know, I asked my son after we finished the coaching, and he picked yours, and I thought, oh yeah, he's picked it because Sam was in it. Of course he picked Sam's. And what I actually said was he enjoyed the game at the end, because you made, you know, you learned some skills, but you actually turned it into a game which the kids really got into. And I could see you really getting involved in it and getting it and digging in deep with the kids and stuff. And I think that bond between the coach and the kids is really, really important. No matter, you know, whether you're a grassroots coach, whether you're in an academy, it's that bond between, because without that bond, you can't teach. You can't coach, you can't develop them, you can't, because they're not going to listen.
No, we are, you know, there's a coach, and a coach is somebody who just puts sessions on, and then there's a teacher, and they're the ones who teach the players the game, or they learn the most off. But to do that, you need to have respect and likability, whether that's a word or not, but like likability. And I don't mean you need to be, you know, he's just a great guy, but
charisma.
Yeah, there almost needs to be like, and I will be for some people, I won't be for some people. I get that. I 100% get that. But you know, you always think back to, if you think at school, you'll always remember your favourite teacher, but you'll always remember them because how they made you feel, and when they made you feel good and you liked them, you probably learnt the most off them. They might not have been the best teacher or the most knowledgeable teacher. The best or the most knowledgeable teacher was probably the one you didn't like, because they made you feel a certain way. And I think coaching can be very similar at the early stages, definitely with those age groups.
Well, what would you say you try and build first in those younger players? I mean, you've obviously said that technique is part of it, but it's not something you particularly focus on. So what, confidence, bravery, decision making, what do you think is the...
You just alluded to it there about the session this morning. So there'll be a bit at the start that's kind of building a rapport with the players, obviously, but if you've got them over time, you've already got that. But best thing is, if they want to keep coming back, you're doing a good job. You know, if you're doing a session every week and they can't wait to come back or can't wait to be part of it, that's the first thing. But within the session, I think, like you mentioned it there, you're giving them, let's say an hour. You give in an hour session, if you've got them, you may be doing the first 15, 20 minutes of working on something to try and help them and guide them in, whether that's, I don't know, their set position or their stance or the way they dive, or working on a 1v1 technique, whatever it might be, catching a high ball. You do practice all that further to learn, but then the next 45 minutes, half an hour, let's play a game. Let's play a game around that and get them enjoying it and get them running around and getting them trying to make these saves and put these techniques or these actions and skills into place in a game-based fun session again, because essentially it's a little bit pointless if you're doing it in isolation and then, you know, it's not fun, it's not enjoyable, but they do it in isolation and then the game comes around and they can't put the two together.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing. We mentioned confidence and bravery. I don't think you can give people that, but I think you can create the environment to support and stretch that. That's something you can't, this is only my opinion, I can't go and give somebody bravery. You know, that's obviously something that has to come from them, but I can try and facilitate that bravery actions to happen or the confidence to happen. You can't give somebody confidence. You can try and help them with it, but you can take confidence away very easily. You can take confidence away and knock confidence out of players very easily, and it's really hard to build it back after you've done that.
I see a lot of keepers who do one-to-one coaching sessions, or they do group goalkeeper coaching sessions, and they do their team training sessions where it's away from that goalkeeper coach and it's with their team coach, and the two aren't the same person, and they're trying to get different things out of the kids and teach them and coach them in different ways. But for me, a lot of the time, what seems to be missing is that link between somebody who knows what they're doing as a goalkeeper, as a coach, supporting the kids in that team environment. Because you see the outfield players get the coaching, right? Like, because that's what most coaches know. They know the outfield environment, and a lot of time the goalkeeper can kind of be stuck in the box, being target practice almost. If you're lucky, like you get developed as a goalkeeper, you get developed the outfield stuff, but there never seems to be that link back the other way, which from a lot of the coaches we've spoke to is becoming more and more important. You being involved as a sweeper keeper, you need to know both the outfield, but then you see it's important as well for the outfield players to understand the goalkeeper too, right?
Yeah, of course. I think like the way coaching's slightly changing would be you have to start UEFA C now. So if you're going to be a coach, there's a UEFA C level, and part of the UEFA C level there's a little element on goalkeeping, and it's don't get me wrong, it's not the technical aspects of goalkeeping. If you want to learn that, you go on your goalkeeping pathway, but it's been a real drive from UEFA and FA to implement integrating goalkeeper into outfield sessions and what you might coach them within that, you know, simple things such as their position, their communication and their actions within that, whether it's a possession practice or something out of possession. But integrating the goalkeepers into it is really crucial and really key, because they're going to spend a lot of time with the team, and most of their effectiveness is going to be in the game with the team and what they do in the team and against other teams. It's not going to be one-to-one with somebody. That's where we can try and help them to be more successful within the team scenarios. So definitely getting outfield coaches to implement the goalkeepers and keep them engrossed and be able to connect that little bit together. And likewise, the goalkeeping coaches have to be, you know, driving that as well. If you're going to be a goalkeeping coach to really help your goalkeeper, I think where you can help them with the learning is you've worked on some bits with yourself, and then if that's going into the team, you're still there supporting and helping within that moment and helping them connect the dots from the isolated practice, if you like, that then joins into the team. That's still your job as the goalkeeping coach. Your job's not done when they go over to the team. Your job is still to help them and guide them through what they need.
Got to find the trigger points for when they do the things that they've been learning one-to-one. Got to put that into practice with the experience of when do I leave my line to go out for a 1v1? When do I set, and I have gone out for that 1v1? What's the things I'm looking for? And I think it's tough because quite often you don't have both coaches present at the same time. And that's the way things are. So it's interesting. I think as things develop more, I think that might be something that maybe has to change a little bit for the grassroots coaches. Are going to have to become more comfortable with their keepers. So you then moved into Birmingham City and you led the academy programme. So what changed for you as a coach when you're all of a sudden responsible for the entire age range?
Yeah.
What's different then?
So one of the first things that changed, not necessarily at Birmingham, there was a little transition period at Bolton. So I've already mentioned EPPP. That's quite evident and heavily in our academy systems now. But when that came in, it made you put syllabuses together. It made you put individual development plans together. It made you do all these things that sometimes at Bolton you were subconsciously doing it without it being on paper or without thinking about it properly. So it made you put a programme in place and really think about different things and different ways of doing things. And when I first went into Birmingham City, I suppose what I brought to Birmingham City was my coaching. What I learned from Birmingham City was developing players, people, and utilising the programme to help them develop. That's exactly what I learned. So when I came to Birmingham City, there was definitely an emphasis on, you know, improving the players and making sure everything's aligned, which was something that we not had at Bolton, but we'd not thought about it too much.
Yeah.
And the academy manager at the time would have been Christian Speakman, who was brilliant for me, really good for me. At the time, I couldn't use a computer really. You know, I couldn't use we had one computer at Bolton in the grounds and that we just logged on PMA whenever we could. And then I go to Birmingham City and you get an Apple Mac that I didn't know how to use it. And, you know, all the off-pitch stuff now really started to like develop me as a coach and make me better on the pitch. So all the analysis side of things and really taking ownership of that sort of stuff, to do my clips with my players, to make sure that we did one-to-ones with players after training, filming training, but filming the right things, you know, and going after that sort of stuff. And my sessions started to change. They really started to change. So I've got a few people that I constantly keep in touch with and keep in contact with for different things, if you want to call them mentors or something like that. And I'll never forget one, I won't say who it is, but one person I sent in my session from Birmingham, and I thought, yes, it's top this. Really good session. Thought it was really good, really good. And I cringe now when I think about that, because if I watch that session back, it was terrible. It really was. But I did this session, I sent it to him, and he said, you know, come up and have a coffee and stuff like that. And I went to meet him, and he was like, you look like the same. You look like any goalkeeping coach in the country. It was like shot across the bow a little bit. what's your point of difference? Like that, I could have watched that, and that if I didn't know it was you, it could have been anybody. You know, and this session doesn't make sense. When do they do that in a game? What's going to set you apart from these types of goalkeeping coaches? And how are you going to be slightly different? How are you going to get to where you think you're going to get there one time? And it was like, wow, like, yeah, I've not thought about that, or I need to think about this. So I started to play around with my sessions a little bit and start to, ironically, spend more time with outfield coaches to flip it the other way.
Yeah.
So what are you teaching your strikers in these scenarios? And they're starting to tell me, all right, well, if I know that's what the strikers are getting taught, how can I teach the goalkeepers against that?
Yeah.
And how does my session now replicate this? So, that session, yes, in terms of it was rubbish. I'm laughing because it really was terrible now, thinking back. But my sessions then started to change, and things like defending the space or balls behind the back line. Again, another coach was saying to me, I don't think our goalkeepers are very good at it. Why is that? And I was like, well, because we're not doing it until the game. So how are we going to do it? Well, I need to start putting goalkeeping sessions on that they coach balls in behind and defending. But maybe we come together as a staff and we put sessions on where players are working on running in behind from an attacking point of view. Well, we're now working on balls being played in behind and defending the space and getting the distances right. And we're getting a little bit closer now to developing the players and helping them when they get to the games. Yeah. So Birmingham was brilliant. Terrific for me to like really start open my eyes to the off-pitch stuff, but actually being a better coach on the pitch with session design and what I'm trying to coach the players and how I can help them try and be a little bit more successful and get to the next level, whether that's like just becoming an under 18, 16. Can I get that 16-year-old to the under 18s? Can I get him to the under 18s? Can I get the 18-year-old into the 21s or 23s when it was then? And that 23s, can I now get him a professional contract? So there were all these little milestones that we were constantly trying to push to get them to.
It's a good point, because a lot of players probably don't think about it from the coach's perspective, but you guys are working top down, right? You know the kind of keeper you're trying to develop, and there's usually a kind of a strategy in the back room in the club about what kind of a team they want to build and how they want to play and what's the ideal scenario, and then that feeds down into the keeper pathway, right? So think of it from that kind of perspective. How would you design a keeper pathway that works? And thinking to explain that to the kids that are out there wanting to get into academies, or maybe they are in academies, they probably haven't thought about it from that perspective. So how can we help them understand what it is that they're up against, really, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
If you're in an academy, there has to be a start point. So you're going to have a syllabus that is working on a variety of different things for the goalkeepers. Age and stage specific as well. I remember we had, like, say, 6 weeks is a syllabus, and one of those weeks might be crossing for the under 9s to 11s. I know the first thing people are going to shout down this podcast is they're not going to face a cross at 9s, 10s, 11s. They're probably right. But when do we coach them to deal with a high ball? At 12? Or can we put the fundamentals in place now and only do one session around it every 6 weeks to keep, because it's not that important. But when they start to transition into maybe 12s to 16s now, well, we might do 2 sessions around that now. And then when we get to 16s into 18s, we might be doing 3 sessions around that now, or 3 dedicated weeks of syllabus sessions around that now, because the level of importance is getting there, and you're now developing your young goalkeeper to go through each phase of foundation, youth, and into pro phase, and it's becoming more relevant to them and what they need to learn for the game. Exactly the same as in possession. 9s and 10s will be around and through passes, for example. But I would encourage my players to play longer passes as well. They might not hit the longer pass, execute it, but I praise the intent, because they're looking for the right pass. When do I expect them to be successful? I don't know. When they can probably reach them areas, or when they get 14, 15. And I'd be saying, if you're never working on it, or never allowing them the opportunity to recognise the right types of passes, if it is in behind the back line on a relatively small pitch, but in behind their back line, when do you expect them to look for it? If you're not dripping the little nuggets in lower down. So I think understanding that, really, understanding what the players potentially need right now and how you're going to develop them as they get through age and stage.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point in that quite often we just let them step up. So even at a young age, moving up from under 5s to 5-a-side to 7-a-side, and a lot of teams don't get the opportunity to even try and coach the differences between the five-a-side and seven-a-side. And it's interesting to hear that from the coach's perspective in terms of, we want to be, you might not be dealing with, might not even be able to header, you're not needing to catch high, but if you coach them early, by the time that's coming in, then they're going to be more capable. They've got the experience. They've got the muscle memory to be able to do it at least, and then they can start to put it in practice. It's useful. You went from Birmingham to Aston Villa, and I'd imagine you met some interesting characters at Birmingham to start with. You've mentioned Christian Speakman. I can imagine some of the players that were coming through the academy at that time were really hard. Birmingham are very well known for their setup. What would you find different from Aston Villa versus Birmingham, aside from the derby rivalries and the jokes that I'm sure that came across with that? Is it a different environment altogether, or more of the same but at a different level?
Yeah. So again, Aston Villa was like another little step up and a different environment and a different expectation and perception. So
Blues fans have just switched off. By
yeah,
they're gone. Sorry.
No. Aston Villa have an expectation of being the biggest club in the Midlands. That's what they have an expectation of. They obviously have a bit more opportunity financially. So from the first time ever in my career in academies now, and it happens a lot more now at multiple different academies, but we're walking back from a few years. The first time now I can recruit goalkeepers for money. We can buy goalkeepers, even like 16, 17-year-old goalkeepers, which is like alien to me. At Bolton Wanderers, we were hardworking, really hardworking, trying to get careers for people, not necessarily at Bolton, but just trying to get careers and help people get careers. And from a goalkeeping aspect, we were often taking, we're such a small fish in the northwest of England with mega powerhouses such as Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Everton. Even Blackburn at a stage would have probably been considered slightly ahead of Bolton as an academy at the time. And you can be taking, released players from those clubs and trying to give them another opportunity and working and developing them. Birmingham City, massive emphasis on youth, like you said, and keeping the club afloat at that time when they were going through a really tough period. So a massive emphasis on youth progressing into the first team early and maybe selling them on to keep the club afloat and repeat again, to go into Aston Villa where, it was almost, if we haven't got one at 16, we'll just go and buy the next best one if we can. And it was like, wow, okay, let's try this first. Let's try and get our programme, up and running. Let's try and develop our own goalkeepers. Let's try and pull goalkeepers in from the Midlands to Aston Villa, who's got fantastic facilities. Again, Bolton, Birmingham, Villa is another step up in facilities and the opportunities you can get. What I did find at Aston Villa was like, I'm so glad that I was at Bolton and Birmingham before that, and Aston Villa wasn't my first club with such brilliant facilities, shiny facilities, balls, any football you want. I'm not taking footballs and cones back home that are wet through back to Sheffield, for my day off, and they're in the car stinking because everything's there, everything's perfect for you. So I'm so glad I had that bit because it really made me think, right, we can really do something good here at Villa because we can like start developing like we would as if we were a club that is like a club that needs to take players from somewhere else or needs to develop. And let's develop our own first, knowing we've got the fallback of we can also add in by recruiting. And being a recruiter was something completely new to me. I almost felt like it was my own money. As in like, somebody saying this goalkeeper's worth X amount, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't always like in terms of in the building. I've never dealt with that before. I don't want to make a mistake. But we did purchase a few goalkeepers who Aston Villa who have gone on to play for the first team, and now they've moved on and they've got a career, good careers as well. Some are playing. One's played in European competition and stuff like that. So it was definitely an eye opener in terms of. I'm bringing the best bits from the other clubs with me, but now there's this whole new world I've got to learn and open my eyes up to how much more possibilities we've got to develop youth players.
Whilst you were at Aston Villa, you've also said that you were temporarily first team goalkeeper coach as well. How big a step up is that from where you are at the academy? Because you're already coaching the under-20s, like the reserves, right? The under-21s at that point.
It can be if you've never been around it before, and for now you're straight in. Like I'll go back to Bolton when I was 19. I had to take the first team for a week, just training. It wasn't games, but I had the first team for a week. You know, a few years later now, I'm up with Aston Villa, and I now feel I can try and coach a little bit rather than just put a session on and hope it finishes quickly. I'm in a different space now because of some different experiences, but. Gary Walsh was really good because he had me around the first team. So the first team goalkeepers knew me quite well. He'd be involved me in quite a lot of the sessions, and he'd be allowing me to take, maybe the first part of the session, maybe the first 10 minutes, and then he'd lead on from that. Or a couple of first team goalkeepers go into the 11v11 with the team, and there's another goalkeeper. He'd say, "Why you work with him for a little bit?" So when Gary left with Steve Bruce, and then we had to step in to take the first team. I already knew the keepers quite well, because I'd been around them a little bit, so it wasn't that difficult to create a rapport or something like that with them. But it was definitely a step up in terms of, now this is performance. Now this is different. Don't get me wrong. There's elements of development still going on at first team. Of course there is, but we're now in that different space of this isn't academy now. This is. Your first game's Millwall away. You got to win that. 2 days later, it's Norwich away, and then at the weekend it's Swansea at home, and there's a new manager who doesn't know me. I'm just helping out. There's a new manager who doesn't know me, and yeah, I don't think it was such a massive step up. It was just different. It was just a completely different environment, and being at a club like Villa, it's a huge football club, and it's the first time I actually appreciate professional players, what they go through on the pitch. If you've ever been to Villa Park before, when they're behind you, there's probably no better fans when they're behind you. Like the whole end of Villa and everything is incredible. The atmosphere is incredible. But when they're not behind you, they let you know as well. And that can be tough for especially young players or professionals to get through. But there's been some fantastic goalkeepers that I've played for Aston Villa and dealt with that pressure and stuff like that. And I can only then think what it's like then at Manchester United, or what that's like at Liverpool, and it goes up again. There's another level. So I don't know if I fully answered your question now. I've kind of waffled a little bit, but I don't know if I fully answered your question.
I was going to say, I think we need to get Christian to get you a ticket in the South Stand before he finishes his commitments with Sunderland altogether. But so you've also worked as an outfield coach as well during this time at Villa, and as a set-piece coach. That's got to be a fascinating kind of peek behind the scenes, and I guess rounds you off as a coach as well, right? Like you've done the whole circle then at that point.
Yeah. You mentioned Christian. I mentioned him again, how good he was for me at Birmingham. Like, I was taking my outfield A licence at the time, and I did say to him, I'm going to take my outfield A licence. I think I need to practice with outfield players to make sure that I can pass the licence and be good enough to pass the licence. I'm a goalkeeping coach, and he was like, you do as many sessions as you want, get involved with Mike Dodds, get involved and do as many sessions as you want. And again, I always remember what was great about Birmingham and Christian was, like, you felt free to bring ideas to the table. And I'll never forget, one of my ideas was like, right, well, every time it's FA Youth Cup, the players seem to be like, rabbit in headlights with it, and how can we bridge the gap a little bit? And this was before under-17s programmes and stuff like that started to come out. It was very much 16s, 18s, and FA Youth Cup. And one of my ideas was to just play almost like a 17s programme. We'll play one game a month, and we'll have a variety of different teams. So we'll have a Category 1 team, I think it was Leicester City, so we'll play somebody in a slightly better academy. We'll play somebody at the same level as us, but then let's play like a Walsall as a Cat 3, which would be different, and then let's play a non-league team, but let's make them under 18s or 19s and they beat us up a little bit, and we'll put a bit of pressure on the lads and we'll try and go like that. What do you think? And he just turned around and went, yeah, brilliant, crack on with it then, and you can coach him. It was great. It was like, it's only once a month, it's one game, it's a couple of training sessions with the outfield players, and then lucky enough to take a game and do a game, which was part of my A licence as well, but stepping me into a completely different world of like, oh, this is what it feels like to be a lead coach now.
Yeah.
And me now as a goalkeeping coach appreciating how tough that is for them as well, doing that role. Even though it was just an academy game or an under-17s fixture, it made me appreciate that. And, you know I've gone back to Birmingham, but when I'm stepping in at Aston Villa, I've got a few coaches who were very open-minded. So, Kevin McDonald was the under-21s coach at Aston Villa with Mark Delaney. But if it was units, like Kevin McDonald was more than happy for me to take a back four unit and just do like 15 minutes with them working on defending crosses. And Mark Delaney was at the top end doing the attackers or something like that. And then when Mark Delaney took over the team at 21s, it was just me and him. So for about an 18-month period, it was, I need you to help me out and be more of still a goalkeeping coach, 100%. That was my main job, but need you to assist with the players a little bit more. And, I'd end up taking some of the out of possession, press and stuff like that. And all the out of possession work, I'd do that for a couple of weeks and he'd do the in possession and we'd switch over. And again, brilliant for me, but it actually inadvertently made me a miles better goalkeeping coach. It started to make me understand the game more and linking back to my sessions and what I need to coach the players now and the goalkeepers now, knowing what I need to coach the team or help with the team. So again, opportunity, really fortunate those scenarios just manufactured themselves and I just kind of got through into it. But yeah, it was really good.
So I guess generalising a little bit, thinking about grassroots keepers that end up in the academies, do you think that they're kind of specialised too early? Is that something that you see a lot? Like they're almost always just goalkeepers, but they haven't really had that experience of outfield because maybe they only ever want to be a goalkeeper. They've not put themselves outside of their comfort zone.
I think they possibly could be. I don't think we'll ever really know until we see in, I don't know, 15 years time, 20 years time, if everybody is just being specialised as a goalkeeper from grassroots and then into academies, if that is the case, and I'm not sure it fully is, but if that is the case, you'll only know if that's worked with how good our young English goalkeepers are in 15 years time. We'll only know that. But going back to Aston Villa, my first week there, we had a goalkeeper. I won't say who it is, but we had a goalkeeper who was on trial. My first question to him, he couldn't dive. He could not dive. And my first question to him, it was my first week. And the first question to him was, who's your favourite goalkeeper? Random question, obvious question. He took ages to reply and he just said, I think it's Manuel Neuer. I thought it was quite strange. Like, you asked me who my idol was and I straight away told you it was UCS Glenn, but he was like, Manuel Neuer. So my second question was like, how long have you been a goalkeeper? And it was funny that I'm not a goalkeeper. I was like, how have you got here? And he was like, well, I'm a midfielder for my school's team and he didn't turn up, the goalie, so I went in goal. And then an Aston Villa scout was come over to me and said, would you mind coming in? And I did all right, and would you mind coming in? And it was like, okay, wow. All right. And we ended up signing him, working with him, and he is actually a professional goalkeeper now. So at 15, he actually wasn't a goalkeeper. Yeah. He was an outfield player, and he's ended up transitioning into a goalkeeper. So I don't think there's an answer for either. I don't think you can say that early specialisation doesn't work. Yeah. We don't know that. And, there are goalkeepers that are still coming into the position quite later on from being outfield players. I genuinely don't think there's an answer for either or.
So you've put all of these great experiences together, you've built your toolkit up. How did you end up getting involved with the national team then? Where did that come in?
I've got to be honest, it was always an aspiration of mine. Not a lot of people know this. I was stupidly always hell-bent I was going to play for England, even at 18. If I stand up now, you'd know why I'm not a goalkeeper. I'm 5'9", so nearly 5'9" goalie. But in my head, I was so like, I'm going to play for England. That's all I want. And then, I'm released, couldn't get a club or anything like that. Realisations coming in that I'm only never going to play for England. I'm actually never going to play the game professionally here. And then that's when coaching came in. And then when I saw there was an opportunity in coaching, I was like, right, if I can't play for England, I'm going to coach for England one day. How I'm going to do that? No idea. I've got no idea. I'm going to do it. At the time, got no idea I'm going to do it. I've just got to try and get to the highest level possibly can do. And hopefully one day I'll get recognised for it. And like any other job, like if there was an opportunity open, I just went for it. So that an opportunity came where I just applied for the job, went for the interview, and yeah, it's a pretty boring story, but I went for the interview and I got the interview, and I've been here for 6.5 years.
But I think that's a testament to the fact that you had the courage to apply in the first place, whereas a lot of people probably would just assume that they're looking for somebody, I don't know, like, I'm not that person, you know, I'm not good enough. The self-limiting beliefs, I guess. But having that courage to just put your name forward and put your hand up, like, I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe more people need to put themselves out there and give it a go. What was that first, you know, national team camp like? You went out there.
Yeah, very different, very different. So you're coming from club football where you know your players, you're working with them day in, day out, you know exactly what they need help with, but you also know their strengths. And then in the club, like in a club, you'll know who your number one is, and the number two knows who he is, and the number three knows who he is. It's very rare that they don't know the pecking order, if that makes any kind of sense. And in international football, even at the younger age groups, like under 17s or something like that, can be quite tough for them because we'll internationally have the same 1, 2, and 3, especially when you get to tournaments and stuff like that. But you're forgetting you've got 3 number ones because they're number ones for their clubs. Yeah. So that can be quite different in terms of getting them to understand this is part of international football. This is part of a career, really. Inevitably, one day you're probably going to find yourself in a 2 or a 3. Very, very few people experience being a number one all the way through their career and being that top dog all the way through. There are there, Gigi Buffon's one, they are there, but very rarely you'll do different roles at different times, and it'd be quite difficult for a 16, 17-year-old goalkeeper to understand that, because they all want to play for England as well. Of course they do. They all want to play for England, pull a shirt on, and represent the country. So off the pitch, that was kind of a different dynamic. On the pitch, you're working with 3 different styles of goalkeepers. So at your club, we mentioned the programme before. Yeah. I'm not saying every goalkeeper is the same, but you can have a similar style because they've come through your syllabus or your
molded
system.
the keeper to your way of doing things.
Yeah, and they will be slightly different, of course, but they'll be on the same sort of trajectory where you give 3 different goalkeepers. You know, you can have one that's you can have one that's got this type of profile, and then the number 2's got a completely different type of profile, number 3's got another different profile, and finding a way in a short period of time to make them effective enough to play the game, and maybe a really high stakes game, was different. So it's almost like a little blend of development and performance, which I really enjoy. We're still developing players at England, the youth players, we're still developing them all the time. We're giving them experiences that they potentially don't get at clubs, or don't get enough of at clubs. We're giving them different coaching, but we've got to perform and win. We got to put ourselves in 17s championships, 19s championships, 21s championships. We've got aspirations of. It's the same as the academy. We need to expose our 17-year-olds to this. Is the first time they get to European championships at 17. We've got to get them to a championship. We've got to get them experiences of knockout stages, hopefully winning it, which the national teams in the past have done that, because if they might transfer through to the senior team. So can we give them experience of tournaments now, get them there, and try and perform and win, so it helps them if they're lucky enough one day to represent our senior team at the major tournaments. And that, as a coach now, that's a completely different dynamic to club, completely different dynamic. I'm working with clubs as well. You know, how I think this goalkeeper needs to play for us could be completely different to how they play for their club. And it's an interesting dynamic where you've got to be really careful. I have to be really careful to be saying what you're doing at club is wrong, because that's not right.
Can't tell them they're wrong, right?
But that's not right though either, because the club are doing what they need to do for them, but we need them to play differently. And I think the best message is we're only asking you to play differently. The best players in the world can adapt and play different ways. So if you're going to be one of those players, I want you to play slightly different for us. However, if you play that way for your club for us, then that's wrong. And if you play in the way for your club for us, that's wrong. You've got to be adaptable and play 2 different ways and stuff like that. So the biggest challenging bit was that.
So think about the time in the camp. How hard is it to balance the idea that you've only got limited time to work with the keepers ahead of their big games, versus we need to change these things that perhaps the club haven't worked on, or the keeper hasn't worked on, or maybe you've done something different for that game. How hard is it to balance that finite time that you've got with changing things?
Yeah, I think if you look at it from a finite point of view, then you could be doing the job wrong. You got them for 10 days. But ironically, like if they're at a club for 10 days and they're training for, I don't know, 7 of those 10 days, but they're only in for an hour and a half when they go home, or they're only in for a couple hours or whatever, or you might only have, we've got them 24/7, so it's not just on the pitch that we can try and help and develop the players.
Yeah.
They're 24/7 with us for 10 days. You know, we're in each other's pockets, so we can work on the pitch, but we can also work off the pitch with them. You know, whether that even is going through clips or general chat, how things are going, loans, all that sort of stuff that they're going through, and helping with that. And I don't necessarily think clubs aren't doing stuff. I think that'd be wrong to say. Yeah. Definitely wrong to say. You know, you're just noticing maybe certain elements that you might try and inspire them to go back to the club to work on.
Yeah.
So at a club, you'd be doing your individual development plan sessions. You'd be doing specific sessions, working on something really specific you've noticed, because that's your program. Yeah. We need to have really, really good dialogue with the clubs, which we have got, to sort of go, look, this is something we've noticed. Is this the same? And you know, I'd say quite a lot of the time it is. They've noticed the same, and we'll say to the player, look, you need to go back to your football club and develop this side of your game and work on this side of your game, because this is really going to help you and push you even further and make you even better goalkeeper. That you already are an excellent goalkeeper, but make you just even a little bit better. So yeah, inspiring them to go away and continue their progress and work back at clubs is a big part of our work, and that's what we should be doing.
What would you say, you know, if there's a 15-year-old goalkeeper who wants to play professionally, they're maybe at an academy, or they're not sure whether they're going to make it or not, what's the one piece of advice that you give them that will help transition into a professional contract?
And this is where it all fell apart. If you've watched this far, thank you very much for staying on this long. I hope you found it interesting so far. But at this point of the podcast recording, my challenge that I'd forgotten to bring a charging cable for my laptop came into effect, and the laptop died, which means we lost 3 cameras and the audio source. Luckily, I always record with 5 cameras, and I had 2 phones set up. And so we still managed to finish the last 10 minutes or so of the recording, plus the community questions. But you will notice that there's a change in the audio quality. I apologise. We've tried to clean it up as best we can. But just like Gary Lineker, I also have podcast problems that are real world. Learning lesson for next time: bring your charging cable. Hope you enjoy the last 10 minutes or so. Try not to laugh too hard at my mistakes. And bonus points for everybody who sees the sheer horror on my face as I realise that I might have just lost the entire podcast, because at this point I didn't know whether it was safe or not.
We had the 13 to 15-year-olds. I said it to him today around, sounds daft, but like this too cool for school attitude a little bit. Like you've got to get the most out of everything that you do. So, you know, and I'd have been the same at 13, 15. I'd have been the same, you know, I had the same outlook, and like, I'd have been a little bit, you know, in some sessions I might have been a little bit the same in terms of like, not trying, but like, I don't want to over-try because I don't want somebody to call me busy. You know, I don't want somebody to take me academy because I'd be too professional, too serious. Yeah. And I'm not saying you need to be really professional and really serious all the time, but just don't waste any minute you've got. You know, don't waste any minute you've got. And if you think you've had an excellent session, it's never as good as you think. And if you've had a bad session, it's never as bad as you actually think. You know, if you sometimes watch sessions back, and everybody has the opportunity now to film sessions and stuff like that, or you've had a bad game, you know, okay, who cares? If you have a bad, everyone has a bad game, everyone has a bad training session, don't worry about it. Let's move on to the next one. You can't affect what's just gone, but you can affect what happens next. The most important moment in football is the next one, not what's just gone, because you can't change that. So, just not wasting any opportunity you've got. Grasp every opportunity you've got, train your hardest, do your best. You will have bad days, you'll have great days as well. So continue to just keep doing things well, and keep performing and keep pushing yourself to be the best you possibly can be. Everything else just takes care of itself. You can only control what you can control. You can't control anything else. You can't control whether the manager picks you. You can't control whether you have a good game. You can't control the result, but you can control how you behave in those moments and how you apply yourself. That's what you can control. So as long as you do that, everything else generally takes care of itself.
So then, what's one coaching belief that you had early on that you've completely changed your mind on over the years?
Yeah, I can actually say this because I came from a system that I saw worked, like a coaching system, curriculum if you like, coaching way.
philosophy, you want to call it philosophy, goalkeeping. It worked. I saw it work. I was going through it. I felt it was working for me. I coached that philosophy straight away because that's all I knew. And there was some short-term success with it. And then the biggest belief was not every goalkeeper is going to be the same. And you need to get the best out of the goalkeepers that they've got. So, you know, it was like, my early belief was like, well, they can't do that, so they're not for us. And that was my early belief, and I made some bad decisions when I was a young coach to either release a player or not sign a player because we couldn't do what we were asking them to do right at this moment in time. So it was almost like in my head that they're not going to fit our philosophy. That's it. You know, they can't do this, they can't do that. So, you know, they're not. And then a few years later, they're like, professional goalkeeper. Wow, I didn't see that coming. Like, where's that? Like, you know, how's he got there? And it'll be because somebody else somewhere would have got the best out of them and unlocked them, or unlocked their potential. So, and it makes me think now, like, it's making you try and notice what they're good at and make them even better at that.
Yeah.
And allow them to thrive and flourish with what they're really good at. Don't try and make every goalkeeper the same goalkeeper, because that doesn't work. Whereas I grew up thinking you could make every goalkeeper the same goalkeeper, and it would work for every, and the ones it doesn't work for, they're not going to be goalkeepers. Yeah. So my rigid, narrow-minded view on coaching when I was really young in my coaching thing changed with the different environments I'm in, and if I'm being honest, getting it wrong over and over again.
But that's what we're all doing, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're all doing. And then I guess last question, just to bring it full circle. You know, your idols growing up, we discussed them at the beginning. How do you think they coped today's game? With the differences in, you know, sweeper keepers, playing out, dealing with the press. Do you think they've coped with the change, or?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. People always say that. Like, people always say, you know, how would ex-goalkeeper be like in nowadays game? But I think you have to appreciate their game was different back then, you know, and the game's different now. So if they were the same age growing up through our system, would they have been able to survive? I believe they would, yeah, because they've been coached to deal with the demands of the game now. Yeah. And you asked me the question like, what sets the GT Buffons and people like that apart? Well, that's not going to change. No, they'd still have that. They'd still have the desire to be the best goalkeeper they possibly could be. So the game looked a lot different 20 years ago. In 20 years' time, who knows what it's going to look like? You know, who knows what it's going to look like? Only I think I can't remember the year now, but the goalkeeper rule changed. You know, a few years ago, when now people can come inside the box in the goalkeeper. Well, look how that's developed goalkeepers. Look how that's changed the game of football. There's going to be something else. There's going to be something else that changes. People will be looking at, I don't know, Edison one day in 30 years' time and saying, would he survive in today's game now? There's going to be the same things. Yeah. I think the way football evolves and the way it changes, it's up to us as coaches to adapt to that, to coach our players as best as we can, to that, understand it as coaches and try and help the players and develop them through. So if you're asking the question, would my idols have survived in today's game? If they'd have been brought up in the system, yes, because they had the same characteristic. They'd have had the same characteristic in a belief that they can perform under pressure. If that's with the ball at their feet, they'd have worked on that. You know, our system and our academies and our philosophy today is all about that. So that, yeah, they would have been, in my opinion, they'd have still got that. They'd have still got that.
Thank you very much for your time, Sam. I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.